I'm Gabe Lullo, and welcome to the Do Hard Things podcast. We're talking to go-to-market leaders and entrepreneurs who have conquered the challenges, the hustle, and the grind. Get ready for real talk, real insights, and no fluff.
But the hardest thing in the world right now is not actually closing deals, it's actually getting somebody's attention.
If you don't have that hook in that first 5 to 10 seconds, guess what? They're going to scroll to the next one.
You need to go in and you need to make it sound like yourself. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. And I promise you, we can all tell.
The people that are trolls and the people that are haters never done the thing that you're doing.
I love doing this podcast because I get a front row seat to some of the greatest minds in sales.
Gone are the days of saying stay in your lane. When you're an executive leader and you're an enterprise-wide leader, there are no lanes. You've got to be partners.
Curiosity is like when the type of questions you ask is sometimes the value that you bring.
I need you to tell me when you're ready to buy or what you're ready to do. And I think it's changed so much into like adding more value. And if you're not doing that, then you're definitely going to come off as desperate.
High pressure selling is like a dinosaur tactic at this point.
No parent is like, oh, you should be a salesperson when you grow up, right? Everyone's like a doctor, lawyer, whatever crap. It's never salespeople.
It's not your job to motivate people. It's your job to find motivated people.
It's not cockiness. It's not arrogance. It's confidence knowing I know this and I know that I can help you.
From where I started to where I am today is all because I learned how to sell.
And there's too many people who have only been doing this for 5 freaking minutes. Sit down, close your mouth, actually go out there and get yourself beat up. Then come back and tell me if something is dead or not.
That is exactly why I started this podcast, because right there, that's the epitome of doing hard things.
Welcome back to the Do Hard Things podcast with Lexi and Gabe. Today's guest, Pierce Brehm, is the founder and CEO of Holland Lane Global Advisors, where he helps founders and go-to-market leaders build partner-led revenue engines without hiring a full-time partnerships team. Pierce's philosophy is simple. In a crowded market, the most efficient way to grow isn't to make more noise, it's build stronger relationships. Most companies know partnerships are the unlock for exponential growth, but building and nurturing a partner ecosystem is hard. Founder-led sales burns out, teams spread thin, untapped relationships sit dormant. So Pierce built a fractional partner selling engine. He helps teams align partners, make warm introductions, nurtures the ecosystem, and track what actually converts, acting as an outsourced partnership team that's faster, more scalable, and easier to measure. Pierce helps growth stage companies in HR, HCM, payroll, and B2B SaaS turn relationships into pipeline and win through connection. Pierce, welcome to the show.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Do Hard Things podcast with your hosts, Gabe and Lexi. So excited, Pierce, to have you. We just heard your bio. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Great to be on with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We were just talking in the green room how jealous I am of your Florida weather up here being in the cold. But I'd like to hear, let's go back to that origin story, where you came from, right? What you're all about, because we're so excited to have you. But we want to start from the beginning, right? How did you get into partnerships? What made you decide really to build your business and get into, fractional partnership models?
Yeah, where to begin, I guess, would be my my first outside sales role. I was fortunate enough to be brought in by ADP, which is probably the largest payroll and HCM company for the mid-cap market. And so I started as just sort of a territory quota carrying sales rep for ADP, but I quickly got into partnerships with them, focusing on a number of channels, one of which being employee benefits brokers. Another one was private equity. I did some work with some other strategic partners and really thrived in that role. And really kind of just domino affected there. It seemed that every job that I had after that, that was back in 2013, I believe. Every job that I got after that really centered around relationships and partnerships, and good for me because that's what I love doing most, is just creating new relationships and seeing how we can benefit one another. And so I went out on my first entrepreneurial pursuit back in 2021. And that was on the heels of working in what's called the EOR industry, or the employer of record industry. And that was one of the few industries that really thrived throughout COVID. Long story short, for anybody who's not familiar with that industry, Essentially, what the EOR provides is a means for companies based in one country to employ talent remotely in other countries, fully compliant with local laws and be able to pay them, etc. And as you can imagine, that was a big tool that a lot of companies embraced through COVID when most of the world was locked down for an undefined period of time. Love what I was doing, started consulting in that space, built a tech platform around our consulting, a marketplace. I got through my first acquisition in 2023. Built out a partnership platform for the company that acquired mine, and then really just after that project was completed, realized I wanted to go back into entrepreneurship. I also realized that the space that I was playing in pre-acquisition had become less novel, more understood by the marketplace. So the value for what I was providing back then wasn't as high and in demand as it was at the time. So I just started thinking about, what do I love to do? What have I been good at historically? And it's been partnerships. And so, kicked on Holland Lane about a year and a half ago. And it's all been focused on partnerships. Started out as consulting. Now we have another, I guess I'm just addicted to technology, and we've got a tech platform that helps enable a lot of what we do now. So here we are.
That's awesome. Thanks. That's a great story. And one thing I've heard you say is founder led sales keep burning out, teams get spread thin, there's untapped relationships, they become doormat. What was the moment you realized there was really a gap in the market for what you're doing now?
Yeah, I guess it was really just experiential, like just seeing what I'd seen throughout my career. There was no doubt that partner selling is incredibly effective. In fact, I just put out a LinkedIn post this morning talking about a few statistics that really validate what we're doing. I'll share a couple of them with you. Deals are 53% more likely to close when there's a partner involved, and they close 46% faster. Word of mouth is responsible for 20 to 50% of all purchasing decisions. And the one that really stood out to me and really drives what we're doing here is that a recommendation from a trusted friend is up to 50 times more likely to result in a purchase than a low impact recommendation. And so that has been understood by companies. I mean, that's why we have, channel partner, divisions within these organizations. The big challenge that I saw, though, is that organizations, they, despite all of the statistical data that backs up how effective it is, the big challenge they have is waiting for them to come to fruition because they're all very trust dependent and relationship dependent, and those things take time to cultivate. And so what I saw were really talented sales professionals that were focused on partnerships, not being able to last in their companies. It was kind of a revolving door of employment. Jumping on LinkedIn to celebrate the fact that they joined a team, only to see 12 to 18 months later they're open for work. And the stark reality behind that was that these companies, as valuable as partner selling, is obvious to be, they don't have the financial fortitude to wait it out. And so they look at a couple of different options once they get to that realization. The first one is, okay, we need to assign both partner selling and direct selling to this representative, which only divides their attention, and both of them typically suffer. The second option they typically look at is, well, let's cut bait and hire a new partner sales rep for the team, and then they're just starting the whole cycle over again. And then the third, they'll just abandon partner selling altogether, which to me is the most unfortunate because it's just a huge opportunity wasted. And so I saw this as a huge problem that companies are struggling with. And that's kind of how we started out our offering, was to say, okay, what if there was another way to allow companies to go after partnerships, but not have to wait the time, not have to invest the money that it takes to get them off the ground. And I started looking at the fractional economy first and seeing that there are fractional CFOs, fractional CHROs. Could this be applied to partner selling? And could that be an answer to this problem? And so we started building a model around this and testing it, and ultimately got our first couple of clients and realized, yeah, there's something here.
That's awesome. And, as a founder of your own business, right, helping other founders scale their partnerships, you also mentioned direct sales versus partnership sales. Can there be a combination for both? Because, we have a lot of clients right now where we have founder led sales organizations and companies come to us. And instead of just doing direct sales and booking appointments to sell pipeline or revenue, we're actually prospecting to generate partnership conversations. And there's an outbound motion now that I'm seeing to actually aggregate that partnership relationship. Do you find that to be the case, or do you feel like it's something that should be more organic through content, or what's your initial approach?
Yeah, I mean, your first question, I would say absolutely. There definitely needs to be both. I don't think direct selling is going away. I just think that there needs to be more attention paid and more investments made into partner selling motions. When it comes down to like there's a shift that I'm seeing, and it all centers around AI powered outreach, and I feel like we're all as consumers being inundated with AI generated sales talk tracks, whether it's through LinkedIn or email or phone calls, you name it. We cannot get away from AI outreach, and to me, that translates to noise, and it's really hitting a peak here. And I think people are getting exhausted from it. And I believe the next phase in that exhaustion is ignoring the AI powered outreach and going to those who you trust to make recommendations as to what you ought to buy. And that goes back to those statistics that I shared a moment ago. I really believe that those trusted relationships are going to be the key driver.
Totally. And most people and companies are aware that there's so much growth with partnerships, but why do you think so many still struggle to execute it or really put it in motion?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say the key struggle is consistency and structure. I'd say both of those are missing in a lot of partner selling motion or emotions. When it comes to the consistency aspect, I mean, anybody can jump on a phone call and find alignment. But what are you doing after that is really going to move the needle when it comes to uncovering consistent lead flow? And then on the structure side of things, I think there's a really hard time that companies are experiencing where they don't quite understand, how to measure this, right? Like, how do we know which partnerships are, high performing? Which ones can we rely on? Which ones should we invest in? And so I think without the consistency and the structure, that's when partner selling fails. You put those both in place, and that's where we're seeing results in big ways for our clients.
Yeah, so let's double down on that because, that's what we normally see. We see a partnership happen, and it's just a logo on a website, or it's just a press release, or, just a LinkedIn post, but then it doesn't really drive revenue. So what are those differences between a partnership that is just, surface area, on your website, or an actual partnership that is bringing revenue to the table?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think what I'm seeing is that a lot of companies are treating partnerships as a branding exercise instead of a revenue channel. And so, as you mentioned, companies are, they're announcing new logos, they're doing webinars, they're signing agreements, but there's no like defined ideal partner profile. Like that's where we start all of our engagements is really understanding what the ideal partner profile is, right? Like what industries are adjacent to yours or selling to the same types of organizations. They complement you ideally, never compete. Like who are they, right? If you don't have that, if you don't have an activation plan, no shared revenue target, and no measurement, you don't really have a partnership, and you don't have a partnership strategy. I think if you can't answer like how many partner sourced opportunities should we produce this quarter, again, you don't have a partnership strategy. It's networking. And I think, another, kind of realization that, leaders need to have is that if it's not producing pipeline, it's not a partnership. It's a coffee club. That's plain and simple.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really important for those ecosystems to really turn into revenue. And what do you think would be the best first step when you start building out that network to really make that shift of turning into revenue rather than just that coffee chat group?
I think it has to start with building out the ideal partner profile. That's step one. Is you've got to understand who those aligned organizations or industries are, and who within those organizations you ought to be targeting for partnership discussions. Beyond that, it's creating that structure that I mentioned a moment ago, where you have consistency of branding communications, that they know your brand, they know your value prop, and so ultimately what you're doing is you're activating your ecosystem to go out and proactively mention you. and not just wait for an opportunity to come by that might be a fit. And that's how you build the consistency of lead flow into the organization.
So back in the day, you mentioned COVID. Everyone was going to events. Networking was the place to, the go to events was a place to get networking done. Now it's a lot different. We're all separated, ourselves included, on this call. People are going to less events. We definitely see a resurgence of events, but how do we build a network with potential partners if we're doing it in a very online Zoom, LinkedIn world?
Well, I think it comes down to trying to be as, in person as you possibly can. But as you mentioned, kind of the world's changed. Our expectations of how we engage with our partners has changed dramatically. I still think there's a place for those networking events, and there's a lot of value in being in person. It just isn't necessary, anymore. I think, if we look at, customer acquisition costs and things like that, if you're able to generate relationships in a virtual environment and not have to spend the money on travel and the time that it takes, um, that's a huge win for everybody involved. And so, like, our positioning on this, and then kind of what we activate through our platform is just creating an engine of consistent outreach, but also making sure that it's very human. Like, we do have AI technology built into our platform, but having a very comfortable blend of, the AI and automation that's efficient and effective, but also making sure that there's a human aspect of it too, whether it's from teammates at Holland Lane or whether it's coaching our clients on how to make sure that they're really building relationships with the partners that we're introducing them to. All very critical components of just making sure that you have a successful strategy.
Totally. And we're familiar, we work with a lot of fractional CMOs, CROs, but what does fractional partner selling really look like in practice? Where do you build the relationship versus the client making those relationships?
Yeah, I would say a good definition of that would be, taking a look at the tactical side of partner selling and off plating it to a third party. Because the tactical side, if you have a big ecosystem, and that's what we try to create for our clients, we introduce them to 40 highly aligned partners every month. And so as you could probably see is that after month 3, 4, 5, that becomes a pretty big ecosystem in its own right. And so what are you going to do to maintain the consistency with that many partners and curate your messaging to make sure that it lands with each one of them? And so that's kind of where we come in, is we handle the tactical side of it. And we understand that the companies that we work with have very talented sales professionals within, but being able to osplate that tactical side of things allows them to be strategic in terms of how they're going to market with these partners, and also the relationship building aspect. Like, that's not going to be something we can ever, replicate. That has to be in the hands of the client, because end of the day, they're the ones working together. But if you can spend your time on the relationship building and the strategy that you're developing together, because we are handling all the tactical, then that's where a fractional play can really make a lot of sense, especially in the startup space where they're running very lean. That's where we've seen a lot of success is coming in and kind of enhancing and augmenting their sales teams through what we bring to the table.
Yeah, and just for the audience to know, like, you are doing all the tactical stuff, right? You're doing introductions, you're nurturing the ecosystem, you're tracking conversations. And you said earlier it's very difficult to track all of this. What are some of those boxes that you are actually checking off to call it an aligned partner versus just a potential partner? What does that look like?
Yeah, so in our platform, we have a partner fit score that comes up before we conduct any outreach. Yeah, and so we don't reach out to any partners that are not an 8 out of 10 or above. And our,
Okay.
our technology is designed to make sure that that's very dialed in. So when we make an introduction, we know that it's going to be a good fit for our client. And so some of the things that we have built into our tech to make sure that everything is checked off, I might have mentioned before in the conversation, but the alignment component that we are looking for is: are you selling to the same types of companies, same size, same industries, and then the personas within those organizations. Like, if you're selling to HR and a partner selling to finance exclusively, and they don't really have a natural adjacency, then that doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so that's kind of how our technology has been designed: is find that alignment from an industry and company and persona perspective. And so far, it's really hit, and then, or I should say, it's really landed for our clients in a big way.
That's awesome. So when a founder says they're tapping into their network, they're attending events, they're sending intro emails, they feel like they're doing everything they can, but it's not working. What do you think they're really missing?
It's a good question. I would say it could be a mix of just the time that it takes to get someone's attention. I think a lot of times too, it's kind of a backwards approach because salespeople just by nature are trying to sell what they were hired to sell. But my honest belief is that if you really want to engage a partner, bring the currency that we all operate with, in this whole partner ecosystem, and that's leads. Be proactive about going and finding your partners opportunities to help them win. And so there's no messaging out there, there's no co-branding out there that will engage a partner as effectively as helping them grow their business through leads. So really taking the time to tap in and see who you can introduce them to, uh, huge activator for partnerships.
That's incredible. So you've picked some really, tight niche industries, right? HR, HCM, payroll. Why did you pick those verticals? Is there something unique there that partnerships, in that space that you wanted to double down on?
There was, yeah. I mentioned I'd worked with ADP. There was a handful of other companies that I'd worked with in the HCM and HR services industries, and so my network over the past decade plus has ballooned to a pretty sizable number. I wouldn't call myself a super influencer by any means, but I've got a good following on LinkedIn, and they all tend to be in that universe. And so that was kind of the first thing that kind of came to mind was where is the value that can serve as a competitive moat for our organization? You're seeing these LinkedIn posts daily, and it's kind of getting nauseating where they're saying AI just killed X SaaS offering, right? And it's like, okay, it didn't kill it, but yes, I understand that companies can now go out and vibe code a replacement solution and unplug from their, maybe it's their CRM contract, and they drop HubSpot or they drop Salesforce, whatever it happens to be. But what we have found is that if you have a competitive moat that can't be replicated by AI, and in our case, it was our collective ecosystem as a team, like everyone on the team has spent time in the HR, HCM, PEO space. So our network was really centered around that. So that gives us a unique ability to be able to create warm introductions for the first few months of an engagement before that gets exhausted. Then our technology kicks in, starts expanding our ecosystem so it becomes evergreen. And so the more we work with those cold introduction or cold introduced partners and we generate relationships, that's just going to expand our reach and expand our network even more because they're going to know that when they're introduced by Holland Lane, that it is highly aligned, that it does have a high degree of confidence to turn into revenue for you that you can predict. And so that was kind of the philosophy behind why we chose to focus early on HR and HCM technology.
Let me unpack that because you do have a lot of followers. You're at almost 12,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is, not a small feat. It's not like Instagram and TikTok where you can get millions of followers for doing a dance in your living room, right? Getting followers in that level on LinkedIn, I kind of like 10x it, right? Whatever I see in LinkedIn on follower count, I kind of like 10x it to what you would think on typical personal social media platforms. So you double down on content, you post amazing content, you have a big following on LinkedIn. What are your thoughts on just the LinkedIn channel as a way to create partnerships and to create those relationships and build and outreach those unique relationships?
I mean, I think it's incredible, and candidly, I'm not on any other social media platform, so LinkedIn is the only place I can get my fix, and I think that probably is the reason why you see the following that you do because otherwise I wouldn't spend as much time. But no, from our own perspective, LinkedIn has been an incredible engine for growing our client population. I mean, we post whether it's insight or whether it's a case study or whether it's announcing a new, client that we brought in that really understands partnerships and, believes in our approach and our strategy. All of that, has generated a ton of inbound deal flow. And so it's my take that if more people were focusing on that kind of activity on a platform like LinkedIn, they would see the same results. And so we use it also to promote our partners. and make sure that, our networks and the extended networks is everybody who, likes or comments or reposts, what have you, just gives you exponential reach and, more brand visibility.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'd love to hear your take on this. So a lot of people will say partnerships take too long, they're not predictable. What's your response to that? And what amount of time do you think you should really start to see that real results happening?
Yeah, so I would say that they only feel slow and unpredictable when they are unstructured. Like a bad partnership strategy is one that's slow, and then a structured one is one that's predictable. So if you define your ideal partner profile, build repeatable sourcing, automate introductions, and measure activation. Um, Partnerships become one of the most efficient growth channels in all B2B. And so that's really a huge focus for us. And so I would say, as far as timing goes, if you're going about it in the traditional way, typically you can see, anywhere from 6, 12, even 18 months before it gets off the ground. But because the traditional way does take so much time, what we've chosen to focus on as an organization is volume. I mentioned 40 highly aligned partner introductions every month. Extrapolate that out for for a year, then you're close to 500 introductions to partners. And that was done thoughtfully. What we found is that in partner selling, it's kind of a version of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. But it's more like 90-10, where 90% of your pipeline, your partner-led pipeline, is generated by 10% of your ecosystem. So like our goal is to make that partner ecosystem as big as we possibly can, as quickly as we possibly can, with sensitivity to the bandwidth of our client, like how many introductions can they really field. So our path to revenue tends to be a lot faster than that 6, 12, 18 months that you see in the traditional way. But I would say, Lexi, just kind of answering your question directly, if you're going the traditional path, then yeah, I would say you're probably looking anywhere from 6 to 18 months before you see any of the fruit of that labor. With Holland Lane, probably half that.
So let's give one thing of free advice because we want people to reach out to you.
Yeah.
So just one, but those founders that are listening, those go-to-market leaders that are listening, and they know partnerships should be part of their strategy, but right now they have no idea where to start. What's just one thing that you would advise them to do?
Yeah, I would say first things first, I have to go back to the ideal partner profile. Look at what industries are out there that are selling to the same industries and the same personas within that complement what you do and do not compete. Once you've got that, that serves as your foundation for building out your partner ecosystem. That's step one.
I love that. And definitely think our network really aligns with this and really excited to get this out. Who's the best person that should reach out to you and where should they do so?
I would say anyone who's in charge of revenue. It could be a founder, it could be a CRO, it could be VP of sales, head of partnerships. If you fit any of those categories, we should probably talk. And then as far as where I can be found, easy to find me on LinkedIn and just search my name, Pierce Brehm. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Pierce Brehm out there. I've only met one other Pierce in my entire life, so I think it should be pretty easy to find. Or pierce@hollandlane.com. Feel free to shoot me an email and we'll put some time on the calendar.
Awesome. Pierce, thank you so much for being on the show. We're so excited for our audience to hear this, and we're super pumped about all that you do, and it's a perfect alignment for our business too, so we love the collaboration. So thank you everybody for listening. Keep doing the hard things, and Lexi and I will see you on the next one.
Thanks, a lot of fun.